In 1986, a 400-pound monster stood across from Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 2, ready to crush the biggest star in wrestling. King Kong Bundy was promised something that night that would change his life forever. But what happened next would destroy his relationship with Vince McMahon and WWE for decades. Bundy later claimed he was guaranteed the WWF Championship if he put Hogan over. But Vince never delivered on his promise. This is the story of wrestling's most forgotten giant. Growing up in Woodbury, New Jersey, Christopher Alan Pallies stood out from day one. By high school, he was already 6 feet 4 inches and built like a truck. But unlike most big guys, he moved with surprising athletic grace. Pallies dominated the wrestling mat at Washington Township High School, winning regional heavyweight championships twice with a combination of size and legitimate technique that most wrestlers never develop. When he stepped on those mats, other kids looked like they were wrestling a grown man. After graduating in 1974, Pallies worked regular jobs like most people from his neighborhood. His entry into professional wrestling came through an unexpected route. A chance phone call involving his brother and a WWF referee's misunderstanding led him to Larry Sharp's Monster Factory in New Jersey. Sharp trained him at the facility that had a reputation for turning athletes into legitimate wrestling attractions. His technical wrestling background from high school allowed him to carry his heavy frame with surprising mobility. Pallies debuted on March 7, 1981, as Chris Kanyon, a generic character that showcased none of the intimidating qualities that would make him famous. Chris Kanyon was just another wrestler trying to make it in the business. He wore standard wrestling trunks, had regular hair, and worked matches like any other up-and-coming wrestler. The character had no menace, no special presence, and no reason for fans to remember him after the show ended. During his first stint with the WWF in the early 1980s, Pallies struggled to find his identity in the wrestling world. The company used him sporadically, putting him in matches without giving him a defined character or storyline direction. He was just another big guy on the roster without a clear purpose. Wrestling fans didn't connect with Chris Kanyon because there was nothing memorable about the character. Pallies knew he needed something different if he wanted to succeed in the business. But even with an underdeveloped character, promoters took notice of his natural size and presence. When Pallies walked into a room, people noticed him immediately. His legitimate 400-plus pound frame wasn't the result of getting fat or letting himself go. This was a naturally massive human being who carried his weight with athletic ability. Wrestling promoters understood that fans would pay to see someone that imposing, especially if he could move well in the ring. Pallies began to understand that his physical advantages were wasted on a generic good guy character like Chris Kanyon. Fans weren't intimidated by a friendly giant who shook hands and smiled at them. They wanted to see someone who looked dangerous, someone who seemed capable of seriously hurting their favorite wrestlers. The wrestling business needed monsters, and Pallies had the perfect physical tools to become one. By 1981, Pallies realized his true calling wasn't as a regular wrestler competing for fan support and cheers. He needed to embrace the darker side of his imposing presence and become something much more terrifying. The transformation required him to abandon everything safe and comfortable about his early wrestling persona. Instead of trying to be liked, he would focus on being feared. Instead of winning fans over with athletic ability, he would use his size to intimidate them. This realization marked the beginning of his transformation from Christopher Pallies into King Kong Bundy. The process wouldn't happen overnight, but the foundation was set. His natural size, legitimate athletic ability, and growing understanding of wrestling psychology created the perfect storm for monster heel success. This transformation would lead him to territories across America, where he would perfect the art of being a wrestling monster that fans loved to hate. The territorial wrestling system of the early 1980s provided the perfect laboratory for Pallies to experiment with different approaches to his character. Each territory had its own style, its own audience, and its own expectations for what made a compelling villain. Pallies understood that he needed to find the right combination of intimidating presence and wrestling ability that would make promoters want to book him as their top monster heel. His journey through these territories would teach him valuable lessons about crowd psychology, character development, and the business side of professional wrestling. More importantly, it would give him the opportunity to work with experienced wrestlers and managers who could help him refine his approach to being a convincing monster. The generic Chris Kanyon character was about to evolve into something much more dangerous and memorable. Pallies found his answer in Fritz von Erich's world-class championship wrestling in Texas, where he learned that being a monster required more than just size. Working under the guidance of manager Gary Hart, Pallies began his transformation from the generic Big Daddy Bundy character into something far more menacing. Hart understood that successful monster heels needed the right combination of look, attitude, and psychology to maximize their intimidating presence. The name King Kong Bundy emerged from this collaboration, combining the Big Daddy influence with the cinematic image of King Kong as an unstoppable force of destruction. The transition from babyface to heel wasn't natural for everyone in the wrestling business. Many wrestlers struggled to make fans hate them after spending years trying to win their approval. But something clicked when Pallies embraced his dark side and stopped trying to be likable. He discovered that his natural size became twice as intimidating when paired with an aggressive attitude and menacing demeanor. Instead of smiling and shaking hands with fans, he started glaring at them with contempt. Instead of helping fallen opponents to their feet, he would stand over them like a predator. Hart refined Bundy's appearance with a solid black singlet that emphasized his massive frame without any distracting colors or designs. The decision to shave his head completely bald created an even more menacing look that made him appear more like a prison inmate than a traditional wrestler. This visual transformation proved effective immediately. By June 1982, Bundy had risen quickly enough to wrestle on Fritz von Erich's retirement card at Texas Stadium, a high-profile spot that demonstrated his rapid ascent into main event-level matches. His success in world class led to opportunities in other territories, including Bill Watts's Mid-South Wrestling promotion. It was in Mid-South where Bundy developed two signature elements that would define his character for the rest of his career. Watts helped create the 5-count pin gimmick, where Bundy would demand that referees count to 5 instead of 3 after his victories. This wasn't just showboating designed to get cheap heat from annoyed wrestling fans. This was a calculated display of total dominance that separated Bundy from other heavyweight wrestlers who were content with standard 3-count victories. When Bundy demanded that referees count to 5 instead of 3, he was telling everyone in the arena that his opponents were so completely beaten that they couldn't possibly kick out during the extra 2 counts. The gimmick worked because it was believable. After taking his finishing move, most wrestlers looked legitimately unconscious. The 5-count demand also served a practical purpose. In match psychology, it gave Bundy extra time to pose over his defeated opponents while the crowd counted along with the referee. Mid-South Wrestling also gave Bundy his finishing move's official name, the Atlantic City Avalanche. The psychology behind this move revealed his understanding of what made wrestling fans react with genuine concern. Bundy would trap his victim in the corner turnbuckles, then use his full 400-plus-pound weight to crush them against the unforgiving steel and padding. The move looked devastating because it actually was devastating. When fans saw Bundy charging toward a cornered wrestler with his massive frame, they understood that serious injury was possible. The visual of a normal-sized wrestler being completely engulfed by Bundy's avalanche splash created real drama in the ring. By the time the referee reached 5, everyone in the arena understood that Bundy had completely destroyed another wrestler. The gimmick became more than just a character trait, it became his signature calling card that made him different from every other monster heel. His work in Mid-South Wrestling proved that both the 5-count gimmick and the Atlantic City Avalanche could work consistently across different territories and wrestling styles. Mid-South Wrestling had a more athletic, sport-oriented presentation than some other territories, but Bundy's character worked perfectly in that environment. Wrestling fans in Louisiana and surrounding areas bought into his monster heel persona just as completely as fans in Texas had. Mid-South Wrestling also gave Bundy opportunities to work with different types of wrestlers, from technical performers to other powerhouses. These matches proved that his character wasn't limited to squashing smaller opponents. When he faced other big men, the 5-count demand took on different meaning. It suggested that even heavyweight wrestlers couldn't match his power and dominance. His American Heavyweight Championship victory over Kerry Von Erich on May 5, 1982, established him as a legitimate title holder capable of defeating established stars. By 1984, he had established a national reputation as a legitimate super heavyweight attraction across multiple territories, winning regional titles and main event spots. Wrestling promoters from different territories began talking about this massive heel who was generating real heat and drawing money consistently. His reputation spread beyond the individual territories where he worked. Wrestling magazines started featuring articles about his devastating finishing move and intimidating presence. This perfected character had caught the attention of the most ambitious promoter in the wrestling business, someone who was transforming the entire industry through national expansion. Vince McMahon needed legitimate monsters to face his golden boy, Hulk Hogan. In March 1985, King Kong Bundy made his WWF debut during the company's aggressive national expansion. The World Wrestling Federation was buying out territories across America and transforming from a regional promotion into a national entertainment empire. McMahon understood that Hogan's heroic character worked best when he faced genuinely intimidating villains who looked capable of ending his championship reign. Bundy represented exactly the type of monster heel that could make Hogan look vulnerable. His initial pairing with Jimmy Hart established his credibility as a main event threat from his first television appearances. Hart was already managing several successful WWF heels and understood how to present monster characters to national television audiences. The partnership worked because Hart's loud, obnoxious personality complemented Bundy's silent, intimidating presence. When Hart would scream at opponents and referees, Bundy would stand behind him like a massive enforcer, ready to destroy anyone who challenged them. This dynamic made both men more effective than they would have been working separately. WWF required instant national television impact, which Bundy achieved through devastating squash matches and his signature 5-count gimmick. These weren't competitive matches where Bundy barely defeated his opponents. They were complete destruction segments where he would demolish smaller wrestlers in under 2 minutes using his avalanche splash and 5-count pin demand. His most memorable early victory came at WrestleMania 1, where he squashed SD Jones in what was announced as 9 seconds on television. This victory made wrestling fans across America understand that Bundy was an unstoppable force who could end matches faster than most wrestlers could get started. The squash match formula worked particularly well on WWF television because the company's production values made Bundy's dominance look more impressive than it had in smaller territories. Professional lighting, multiple camera angles, and quality audio recording emphasized the impact of his finishing moves. When television viewers heard the sound of his avalanche splash connecting with opponents, the move seemed more devastating than it had appeared in smaller wrestling venues with basic production equipment. His transition to Bobby Heenan's stable marked his evolution from mid-card attraction to legitimate main event performer. In September 1985, Heenan acquired Bundy in a trade with Jimmy Hart, who received Adrian Adonis and the missing link in exchange. The Heenan family was WWF's premier heel stable featuring wrestlers who were positioned as serious threats to the company's top babyfaces. Heenan was a master at managing monster heels because he understood that his job was to make his wrestlers look more dangerous, not overshadow them with his own personality. The Heenan family was the perfect fit for Bundy's character because it elevated his status without changing his basic persona. Heenan's other wrestlers included technical performers like Mr. Perfect and powerhouses like Haku, but Bundy was clearly the most physically imposing member of the group. His presence made the entire stable more threatening because opponents never knew when Heenan might unleash his monster to destroy them. The association with Heenan also gave Bundy access to higher-profile feuds and better television positioning. His early confrontations with Andre the Giant showcased his legitimate size advantage over most wrestlers on the WWF roster. These segments were carefully planned to establish both men as monsters while avoiding actual competition between them. When Bundy and Andre stood face to face, wrestling fans could see that Bundy was nearly as tall as the Giant and possibly heavier. These confrontations worked because they suggested that Bundy might be the only wrestler on the roster who could match Andre's legendary strength and size. The Andre segments also served to position Bundy as a credible championship challenger during wrestling's boom period. If he could stand up to Andre the Giant, wrestling fans reasoned, he could certainly challenge Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship. McMahon's booking strategy was building toward major showdowns between Hogan and his most intimidating challengers. Bundy's confrontations with Andre established him as one of the few wrestlers who might actually be capable of ending Hogan's championship reign. Within months, Bundy had established himself as one of the WWF's most feared villains and a legitimate threat to Hogan's reign. His rapid rise through the company's heel hierarchy was unprecedented for a wrestler who had just arrived from the territorial system. Wrestling fans who had never seen him work in Texas or Mid-South wrestling accepted him immediately as a main event performer. His character work, combined with WWF's national television platform, created the perfect storm for monster heel success. As WrestleMania 2 approached, backstage discussions about championship plans were reaching fever pitch. Bundy's positioning as Hogan's ultimate challenge had wrestling fans wondering if McMahon was finally ready to put the title on a monster heel who could carry the company in a different direction. According to Bundy's later claims, this momentum led to a private conversation that would define his entire wrestling career. Bundy later said McMahon pulled him aside during the WrestleMania 2 planning period and told him he would defeat Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship at the Los Angeles Sports Arena. This wasn't just casual conversation about possible storyline directions. Bundy claimed that McMahon specifically guaranteed him the title victory with no other witnesses present in the office. The alleged conversation represented what would have been a massive shift in company direction. If true, this meant McMahon was planning to end Hulk Hogan's championship reign after nearly 2 years of building the company around his superhero character. Bundy claimed that McMahon explained the business reasons for the title change. The company needed to show that even their biggest star wasn't invincible. A monster heel champion would create new storyline opportunities and generate massive interest in whoever eventually defeated Bundy for the title. Wrestling promoters have used monster heels as transitional champions throughout the territorial era. Bundy's size and character made him a logical candidate for that type of role. He looked genuinely dangerous, he had legitimate size advantages over most wrestlers, and fans genuinely wanted to see him lose. His character was perfectly positioned to be a transitional champion who would make the eventual babyface victory more meaningful. However, booking in wrestling frequently shifts, and promoters sometimes tell talent different plans as motivational talk. There is no publicly verified documentation proving McMahon made a binding promise to Bundy. Wrestling promoters often told performers what they wanted to hear to ensure maximum effort during important matches. McMahon might have believed that promising Bundy the championship would make him work harder and deliver a more convincing performance. The build-up to WrestleMania 2 positioned Bundy as Hogan's ultimate challenge through weeks of television programming that emphasized their size difference. WWF television showed Bundy destroying smaller opponents, while Hogan struggled in competitive matches against less imposing challengers. The contrast was deliberate. When wrestling fans saw Bundy crushing opponents with his avalanche splash, then watched Hogan barely defeating wrestlers half Bundy's size, the upcoming match seemed like a genuine threat to the champion's reign. Television segments leading up to WrestleMania 2 showed Bundy demanding 5-count pins, while Hogan needed help from friends to survive attacks from much smaller heels. The booking made Bundy appear unstoppable, while suggesting that Hogan might have reached his limits as champion. Wrestling fans who had watched Hogan overcome every previous challenge began to wonder if he had finally met his match. This uncertainty made the WrestleMania 2 main event feel unpredictable in ways that previous Hogan title defenses hadn't achieved. The steel cage match stipulation favored a monster like Bundy over the smaller Hogan in obvious ways that wrestling fans understood immediately. Cage matches eliminated outside interference and created confined spaces where larger wrestlers held natural advantages. Hogan's usual comeback formula relied on crowd support and momentum shifts that were harder to achieve in cage match environments. Bundy's size and power advantages would be magnified inside the steel structure where escape routes were limited and physical dominance mattered more than athleticism. Steel cage matches historically favored heel challengers because the stipulation neutralized many advantages that babyface champions typically enjoyed. Hogan couldn't rely on referee support or fan involvement to help him overcome difficult situations. The cage match rules meant that Bundy's monster heel tactics would be perfectly legal as long as he didn't use weapons. His avalanche splash finishing move would be even more devastating when his opponents couldn't roll out of the ring to escape. The match stipulation seemed designed to give Bundy every possible advantage over the defending champion. Whether McMahon was serious about changing the title or just motivating his talent remains unclear decades later. The promise, whether real or imagined, shaped Bundy's expectations going into the biggest match of his career. What happened at the Los Angeles Sports Arena would determine if those expectations were justified or if they would become the source of lasting disappointment that would haunt their professional relationship for years to come. The Los Angeles Sports Arena on April 7, 1986, became the stage where those expectations would be tested. WrestleMania 2's steel cage match was supposed to be King Kong Bundy's coronation as WWF champion. Bundy later said he believed he would leave as the most powerful man in professional wrestling. The months of build-up had positioned him perfectly as Hulk Hogan's ultimate challenge. Wrestling fans across America had watched Bundy destroy opponent after opponent with his devastating avalanche splash. Now he stood minutes away from what he believed would be his greatest triumph. As the steel cage match began, Bundy dominated Hogan in ways that suggested the title change was really happening. The early minutes of the match belonged completely to the challenger. Bundy used his massive size advantage to overpower Hogan from the opening bell. He slammed the champion into the steel cage walls with brutal force that echoed throughout the Los Angeles Sports Arena. Wrestling fans who had watched Hogan overcome every previous challenge saw something different in his body language. The champion looked genuinely hurt and overwhelmed by Bundy's assault. Bundy's trademark avalanche splashes had Hogan reeling and seemingly defeated in ways that previous challengers had never achieved. These signature moves were consistent with his established on-screen psychology of total domination. The first splash connected with devastating impact that left Hogan crumpled in the corner turnbuckles. The champion's usual comeback energy was nowhere to be seen. When Bundy delivered his second avalanche splash, Hogan appeared to be completely unconscious. The visual was striking because wrestling fans had never seen their hero look so helpless against any opponent. Bundy stood over Hogan's motionless body and demanded his trademark 5-count pin from the referee. The crowd's reaction suggested they believed Bundy might actually win the championship. Wrestling fans at the Los Angeles Sports Arena began to accept that they might be witnessing the end of Hulk Hogan's reign as WWF champion. The usual "Let's go Hulk" chants were replaced by stunned silence as Bundy continued his systematic destruction of their hero. Even Hogan's most loyal supporters seemed to understand that their champion was facing something beyond his usual challenges. The atmosphere in the arena shifted from confident expectation to genuine concern. When the referee counted to 5 after Bundy's second avalanche splash, wrestling fans realized they were watching something unprecedented. Hogan had never been pinned for a 5 count by any opponent during his championship reign. The visual of Bundy posing over Hogan's defeated body while the referee completed the extended count seemed to confirm that the title change was happening. The challenger appeared to be systematically dismantling the champion who had overcome every previous monster heel challenger. But then something changed in the match that shifted the momentum completely. Hogan began his trademark comeback sequence earlier than expected. The champion started absorbing Bundy's offense and fighting back with renewed energy that seemed to come from nowhere. Wrestling fans who had feared for Hogan's safety suddenly began cheering louder as their hero showed signs of life. The momentum shift happened so quickly that it caught everyone off guard. The exact moment when Hogan escaped the cage came after a brief sequence where both men appeared to be climbing toward freedom simultaneously. Hogan reached the arena floor just seconds before Bundy could escape, retaining his title. Bundy later said the finish had been changed at the last minute. According to his version of events, WWF management informed him shortly before the match that he would not be winning the championship after all. This alleged last-minute change contradicted everything he believed he had been promised during the weeks leading up to WrestleMania 2. This alleged betrayal affected Bundy's relationship with McMahon and WWF management for the rest of his time with the company. He began to question whether other promises and opportunities would materialize as discussed. The relationship between Bundy and WWF management became strained because he felt he had been deliberately misled about his championship prospects. His attitude backstage reportedly changed after WrestleMania 2, because he no longer trusted that his hard work would be rewarded with the opportunities he had been promised. Despite losing, Bundy's WrestleMania 2 performance cemented his legacy as one of wrestling's great monsters. Wrestling fans who witnessed his dominance over Hulk Hogan understood that they had seen something special. His systematic destruction of the champion proved that his monster heel character could work on wrestling's biggest stage against its biggest star. The match established him as one of the most legitimate monster heels in WWF history. But the broken promise would create a rift that would affect everything that came after. The company that had built him into a monster was about to start treating him very differently. Bundy's booking trajectory shifted noticeably in the months following his WrestleMania 2 loss. Instead of continuing his push toward main event status, he found himself involved in mid-card programs that seemed designed more for entertainment than establishing him as a serious championship threat. The change was subtle at first, but became more obvious as months passed. His storylines became less focused on championship pursuits and more on segments that showcased his personality rather than his monster heel dominance. His involvement in the Andre the Giant and Giant Machine storylines moved him away from serious championship contention while showcasing his versatility as a performer. The Giant Machine was actually Andre the Giant, wearing a mask, pretending to be a different wrestler to circumvent a storyline suspension. Bundy was positioned as one of the heels trying to expose the Giant Machine's true identity. These segments required acting ability and comedic timing that demonstrated his range as an entertainer, but they represented a fundamental change in how the company viewed his character. His tag team work with Big John Studd created a formidable heel partnership that battled the Masked Machines team throughout 1987. Bundy and Studd were both massive wrestlers who could believably dominate smaller opponents through size advantages alone. Their partnership made sense from a visual standpoint because wrestling fans could accept them as an unstoppable monster tag team. The extended focus on tag team wrestling meant that Bundy wasn't being positioned for singles championship matches, and his individual character development stalled while he concentrated on team-based storylines. His WrestleMania 3 appearance in a mixed six-man tag match featuring midget wrestlers was more comedic than threatening, signaling a character shift that wrestling fans noticed immediately. Instead of being involved in a serious singles match or championship opportunity, Bundy participated in comedy segments that emphasized entertainment over athletic competition. The tone of his WrestleMania 3 involvement was completely different from his dominant performance against Hulk Hogan the previous year. This appearance confirmed that his days as a main event monster heel were ending. Despite the shift toward entertainment segments, Bundy reached the finals of the 1987 King of the Ring tournament on September 4, 1987, showing he could still compete at high levels when given the opportunity. However, his televised WWF appearances became less frequent throughout 1987 and 1988. His matches were positioned lower on event cards, and house show bookings moved him away from championship matches toward mid-card programs against wrestlers who weren't considered main event performers. His last televised match of that initial WWF run came in February 1988, marking the end of his regular television presence. Several factors likely contributed to Bundy's declining status within the company. WWF had established a pattern of using monster heels primarily to build Hulk Hogan's heroic character, and once that purpose was served, those wrestlers often found their roles reduced. Bundy later suggested that his outside commercial work, including appearances in Vendex commercials, may have affected his standing backstage. The arrival of new talent and shifting television priorities also meant the company was developing fresh monster heels who could fill the intimidating presence role that Bundy had performed successfully. His gradual transition from main events to house show attractions throughout this period became obvious to wrestling fans who followed WWF programming regularly. Television appearances became less frequent, and his matches were positioned lower on event cards. The transition happened slowly but consistently over 18 months of decreased push from company management. Whether Bundy recognized his declining status or believed it was temporary affected his attitude during this period, but his professional work remained consistent, even as his booking position declined within the company hierarchy. By early 1988, it became clear that Bundy's monster heel role was being filled by newer, younger talent that better fit WWF's evolving presentation style. The company was developing fresh monster heels who could provide the intimidating presence that audiences expected. His departure from WWF marked the end of an era for the wrestler who had once seemed destined for championship glory. The wrestling business had taught Bundy that opportunities could disappear as quickly as they appeared. But sometimes, if a wrestler was patient enough, those opportunities could return when least expected. Bundy's 1994 return to WWF as part of Ted's $1 Million Corporation seemed like a second chance at stardom after 6 years away from the company. The wrestling business had continued without him, but his name still carried weight with fans who remembered his monster heel work from the 1980s. DiBiase's stable needed legitimate muscle to intimidate opponents, and Bundy's imposing presence fit perfectly with the $1 Million Corporation's arrogant, wealthy villain theme. His return was announced with fanfare that suggested WWF management still viewed him as a valuable performer. The wrestling landscape had changed dramatically during Bundy's absence, with new stars and different fan expectations that made his comeback more challenging than anyone anticipated. Wrestling fans in 1994 were accustomed to faster-paced matches and more athletic performers than the monster heel style that had made Bundy famous. The WWF roster featured smaller, more agile wrestlers who could perform high-impact moves that looked more exciting than traditional power-based offense. Bundy's methodical monster heel approach seemed outdated compared to the flashier wrestling styles that had become popular during his absence. His participation in Survivor Series 1994 marked his official return to WWF programming and his attempts to regain championship-level status through high-profile team matches. The Survivor Series elimination format allowed Bundy to showcase his dominance over multiple opponents during the same match. His avalanche splash finishing move still looked devastating when applied to smaller wrestlers. Wrestling fans who remembered his previous work responded positively to seeing him destroy opponents with the same tactics that had made him famous. But his performance at Survivor Series also revealed the limitations of his comeback attempt. Wrestling fans could see that Bundy had lost some mobility during his years away from regular competition. His conditioning wasn't at the same level as active wrestlers who had maintained their careers throughout the early 1990s. The pace of matches had increased significantly since his departure, and he struggled to keep up with the faster rhythm that contemporary wrestling fans expected. His Royal Rumble 1995 appearance demonstrated his reduced status within the company hierarchy. Bundy was eliminated quickly by Mabel, showing that he was being positioned below newer monster heels who were receiving stronger pushes. The quick elimination sent a clear message to wrestling fans about where management viewed him in the current roster pecking order. His brief Royal Rumble appearance suggested that his comeback was more about nostalgia than serious championship contention. His WrestleMania 11 match against The Undertaker highlighted his reduced role in the company more clearly than any other booking decision. The Undertaker was being positioned as WWF's premier supernatural monster heel, while Bundy was cast as a nostalgic attraction from the company's past. The match served to establish The Undertaker's dominance rather than showcase Bundy as a legitimate threat to current main event performers. Wrestling fans understood that Bundy was being used to put over newer talent rather than reclaim his own main event status. The comeback included some high-profile appearances, but booking kept him below top-tier singles status, and he was released in October 1995. Wrestling fans appreciated seeing him return, but weren't demanding that he receive major storyline opportunities. His work remained professional, but the excitement around his character had diminished during his absence. WWF management realized that nostalgia alone wasn't enough to justify featuring him prominently on television programming that needed to attract new viewers. His work on the independent circuit throughout the late 1990s proved he could still draw crowds at smaller venues where wrestling fans appreciated seeing legendary performers. Independent promoters booked him for special attractions and nostalgia events where his name recognition could sell tickets. These appearances allowed him to continue wrestling without the pressure of adapting to changing mainstream wrestling trends. Wrestling fans at independent shows were more interested in seeing classic monster heel work than contemporary athletic performances. His participation in Heroes of Wrestling in 1999 is widely regarded as among late career low points for several aging wrestlers who appeared on the poorly produced pay-per-view event. The event featured aging wrestlers in poor condition performing matches that highlighted how far they had fallen from their peak years. Bundy's involvement in this event associated him with the worst aspects of wrestling nostalgia, rather than celebrating his legitimate accomplishments. His last recorded match came in 2007 with a big-time wrestling victory over Richard Byrne, closing the book on one of wrestling's most imposing careers. The years that followed would bring new challenges that had nothing to do with what happened inside wrestling rings. Bundy's relationship with his former employer was about to become more complicated than anyone could have imagined. In July 2016, King Kong Bundy made a decision that many observers say likely ended any chance of reconciliation with WWE when he joined a class action lawsuit against the company. The legal action alleged that WWE had failed to protect wrestlers from long-term neurological injuries and had deliberately misrepresented the health risks associated with professional wrestling. Bundy's name appeared alongside dozens of other former wrestlers who claimed the company had prioritized profits over performer safety throughout decades of operation. Many observers say the lawsuit likely reduced his chances of reconciliation or Hall of Fame induction with the company that made him famous during the 1980s wrestling boom. WWE had a well-established pattern of distancing themselves from wrestlers who pursued legal action against the corporation. Former performers who filed lawsuits often found themselves excluded from company programming, Hall of Fame consideration, and any form of official recognition. Bundy understood these potential consequences when he decided to join the lawsuit, but he believed the health issues outweighed concerns about burning bridges with his former employer. The specific allegations in the lawsuit focused on traumatic brain injuries and other neurological conditions that wrestlers developed after years of taking bumps, chair shots, and other physical punishment. Bundy's participation related directly to his years of absorbing punishment in wrestling rings across America. His monster heel character had required him to take significant physical abuse from opponents who needed to look credible against his imposing size. The avalanche splashes he delivered also meant taking hard bumps when opponents moved out of the way, or when matches required him to miss his finishing move. The lawsuit claimed that WWE knew about the long-term health risks associated with repeated head trauma, but failed to inform wrestlers about these dangers. Bundy and other plaintiffs alleged that the company actively concealed medical research about concussions and brain injuries to avoid liability for performer health problems. They argued that WWE treated wrestlers as independent contractors while exercising the control of an employer, creating a legal loophole that allowed the company to avoid responsibility for occupational health and safety. WWE's response to the lawsuit followed their standard approach to legal challenges from former performers. The company denied all allegations and argued that wrestlers understood the physical risks associated with their profession. WWE's legal team contended that professional wrestling was inherently dangerous and that performers accepted these risks when they chose to work in the industry. They maintained that the company had provided appropriate medical care and that any injuries were unfortunate consequences of athletic competition rather than corporate negligence. Wrestling writers and industry observers noted that WWE's general approach toward wrestlers who take legal action against the company became clear through Bundy's treatment after filing the lawsuit. WWE stopped acknowledging his contributions to company history in official programming and removed references to his accomplishments from promotional materials. His WrestleMania 2 main event against Hulk Hogan was downplayed in historical retrospectives that focused on other aspects of the event. The company's message was obvious to other wrestlers considering legal action against their former employer. The lawsuit's dismissal in September 2018 by U.S. District Judge Vanessa Lynn Bryant left Bundy without legal victory or corporate forgiveness from WWE management. Federal judges ruled that the statute of limitations had expired for most claims in the case. The court also determined that WWE's classification of wrestlers as independent contractors protected the company from many liability claims. Bundy and other plaintiffs received no financial compensation for their alleged injuries and no acknowledgement that their health problems were connected to their wrestling careers. Wrestling writers suggested this legal stance created barriers to any potential Hall of Fame induction or legacy recognition that might have been possible before the lawsuit. WWE's Hall of Fame selections often reflected business relationships and corporate politics as much as wrestling accomplishments. Bundy's decision to pursue legal action likely removed him from consideration for future honors, regardless of his legitimate contributions to wrestling history. The company used Hall of Fame inductions as tools for maintaining positive relationships with former performers, not celebrating wrestlers who had challenged them in court. Whether Bundy regretted taking legal action or believed it was necessary remained unclear in his public statements after the lawsuit's dismissal. He never publicly expressed regret about joining the case, suggesting he believed the health issues were serious enough to justify the career consequences. Other wrestlers involved in similar lawsuits had mixed feelings about their decisions to pursue legal action. Some felt vindicated by bringing attention to wrestler health issues, even without legal victories. Bundy died March 4, 2019, from complications of diabetes at age 63, ensuring that any potential future reconciliation with WWE would never be possible. His legal battle highlighted broader issues about wrestler health and safety that continue affecting the industry today. The questions raised about concussion protocols, long-term medical care, and corporate responsibility for performer health remain relevant as wrestling companies face ongoing scrutiny about how they treat their athletes. The lawsuit represented Bundy's final break with WWE and ensured his legacy would remain complicated for wrestling fans and industry historians who must weigh his significant contributions against his contentious final relationship with the company. Wrestling history is filled with stories of talent whose careers took unexpected turns. King Kong Bundy's absence from the WWE Hall of Fame reflects a mix of factors. His legal action is widely cited by writers as a significant barrier, but Hall of Fame decisions are not transparent and may include other considerations. His story shows how broken promises and legal battles can overshadow genuine wrestling achievements. Bundy was a rare, legitimate super heavyweight who became a national monster heel during wrestling's boom period. His main event peak was the WrestleMania 2 steel cage match against Hulk Hogan. His choice to pursue legal action complicated his relationship with the company and his official legacy. Behind every larger-than-life character is a human being fighting for recognition, respect, and sometimes just basic healthcare. Like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into wrestling history, and comment with your memories of King Kong Bundy.